Over the past few years, I have been very deeply touched by the whole world refugee crisis, and it just kind of broken my heart open. And there seems to be a very common thread, for the naysayers about it that say they're just bringing disease and violence and corruption to our country. I'm not sure where they're getting their facts, but the more that I read and learn about their lives, they're coming here basically running from their lives, for their lives. And that the common thread seems to be that in a lot of these countries like Yemen and Nigeria, El Salvador, Honduras, Liberia, there is continual coups, crackdowns, coups, crackdowns, coups, crackdowns, and whoever's in power go on these killing sprees. They extort money from the poor, from the small businesses, people who are trying to get ahead in their countries. So for the most part, a lot of the people who are refugees have got this, they're basically running for their lives. And so what I want, and because we're all come from refugee, you know, lineages or migrant, immigrant lineages, I think that's something that we who've been here for a few, decades really keep forgetting that we came here seeking something better, something different, something hopeful. And so, in the middle of really looking at this refugee crisis all over the world in the past few years, there's been one refugee in particular that has just sort of come up to the surface, and he's sort of used as a, I don't know, some of the critics say he's a poster child for what refugees bring to our country. But I find it to be an extremely powerful, inspiring, and hopeful story. So I want to share a little bit about his life and how he's doing. How he's doing. Um, so he comes from the country of Liberia, which was founded by freed American slaves in the late 1800s. And it wasn't until the late 1980s where there was a popular military coup by Samuel Doe, who took over that entire lineage of Americo-Liberian presidents. They all came from the freed slaves. He was the first one that didn't come from that particular lineage. But unfortunately, like some of the presidents before him, after a while, crackdowns, extortion, corruption, and so forth, starting in the late 1980s. So the former refugee that I want to share the story about today, his name is Wilmot Collins. He was from Liberia. And the story is quite amazing, but in the early 1990s, he was a college student, fell in love with his childhood sweetheart, Maddie Saab. They were going to the university. And what happened is Samuel Doe got murdered and dismembered in 1990, another one of these military coups. And during that time, there was a lot of upheaval in the country, and it was quite frightful. So Wilmot's family gave him and Maddie $5 apiece. His mother said, "You go. Go." There was a lot of child soldiers during these wars in Liberia where they were taking these children out of homes and putting them into these militias, into these rebel camps, and using them for foot soldiers. And so they got on the nearest ship out of Monrovia, having no idea where they were going. They're both 20, 21 years old. They ended up going to Ghana. And this kind of ties in with Venerable Sompton's teaching last night about causes and conditions and how things happen due to causes and conditions. So Maddie, in 1984, was an exchange student in America. She came to, of all places, Helena, Montana, where she did an exchange student, and she stayed with a couple, Joyce and Bruce Notheim. And so she was with them, but they were the host family. So when they got to Ghana with $10 between them, the first thing she did is make a collect call to this family and said, "We're out, we're safe," because both, I want to make sure I've got their names correctly. Joyce and Bruce had been tracking the Liberian Civil War. So they were really worried about it. They made a deep heart connection with Maddie. So they said, "Well, not only do we want to send you money, but we want to help you with your future." So they were able to get her a sponsorship. They got her a scholarship to go for nursing to the University of Montana in Helena. And so her and Wilmot married, thinking that that might help him along, because she had a connection in the States, but he didn't. Unfortunately, the U.S. Embassy thought otherwise. So they had gotten married with that hope, and then when she came to the United States in 1991, she was expecting their first child. So he was left behind, homeless in the streets of Ivory Coast. And through some extraordinary circumstance with meeting a childhood friend, he was befriended by a group of people there, and he was able to go through this vetting process. And this is back in 1991, and this is what he had to go through. Let's see where. And so, he says, if people think that refugees don't get vetted, listen to this is what he had to go through. So this is, once again, Maddie started going through the process in Ivory Coast. First, he had to. First, the UN Refugee Agency wanted a form. Then the State Department wanted a form. Then the Immigration and Naturalization Service, which I think is now ICE, used to be INS, wanted a form. Then the FBI wanted to talk to him. Maddie had to submit phone bills, personal letters, and the INS wanted to talk to their child, Jamie, who by now had been born, on the phone to make sure that Wilmot had a connection in the United States. And so, but it was successful. So in 1994, he came to Helena, and he hit the ground running. And so through that church there, they were able to buy a home. He had entered a silent auction for $75 to be the mayor for the day. And he felt so enthralled by this role that in 2017, this Liberian-American, African-American man, campaigned to be the mayor of Helena, Montana, in one of the whitest states in this country, and he won. And he took, even before then, he took these leadership roles. He started coaching soccer. He joined the Methodist Church. He was in the choir. Evidently has a beautiful voice. He was on the board of the United Way. He joined the National Guard. I mean, he really became an engaged American citizen, doing what you want to do. His willingness to engage and to learn the ropes and to just totally immerse himself in the culture. So he, so on one level, both him and Maddie received a lot of love and support, both from the Nottheims and from the community in general. But there was also a lot of pushback. There were KKK signs sprayed on their garage. He received a fake airline ticket with a monkey in his mailbox saying, "Go back to Africa." And he brought up as his success as becoming sort of this star of the accomplishments of refugees in America. We have a few former refugees that hold executive positions in our governments in America, but for some reason he just kind of broke into the spotlight to where the liberal side, the folks who really believe that immigration can work, said this is a perfect testimonial to someone who brings a commitment, brings talent, brings enthusiasm, is nothing but an asset to this country. And then we have people who are pushing back saying, immigrants and refugees are absolutely national security risks. They bring disease, they bring illiteracy, they take away our jobs. There's no particular basis of the data for that thinking, where in fact there is data to really support that the immigrant community is a huge economic engine in this country. And not only do we get the farmers of the world, but we also get the engineers, we get the architects, we get the lawyers, we get the doctors, we get the teachers in this whole refugee process. We're getting the best and the brightest of a lot of these countries that are running for their lives because they're the first ones to get killed. So he's just, once again, just another one. He worked for Save the Children in Liberia. That was one of his roles, to work for that nonprofit. But what I find, he helped to reestablish a refugee resettlement program in Montana. It's called one of them now is called Soft Landing out of Missoula. But what's so wonderful about Wilmot is that he's just taken this job totally to heart. I mean, he deals with sewer pipes, he deals with snow removal. He'd never seen snow. He deals with, people smoking outside of businesses. How far away do they have to be from the vendors because it's really affecting business. He did a campaign so they could have more firefighters because their fire company was so ill-equipped to handle the growing population of the city that he did a personal campaign with the firefighters and raised over $1 million so they could hire 6 more firefighters. And what has really been quite courageous about him is that the people who have a lot of doubt and fear about refugees, and there are that are quite blatantly outspoken in Montana, is that he has sat down with dialogues and debates with them in public spaces to really hear them out and to hear what are their fears, what are their concerns, and then to give his experience on what it takes to come to this country and what, for the most part, he believes the refugee community, the immigrant community can really contribute to America. And how successful he may be or not, but this nonprofit in Missoula that supports these over 250 refugees that have come in there since 2016, that they have so many volunteers, families that are willing to sponsor the refugees, really helping them in English, learning how to drive. So, I think it's this whole idea that once you meet people face to face and you connect with the heart and you see their motivation, their sincere intention to really contribute to the well-being of this country that they've adopted, coming with only $10 in their pockets, with this kind of determination and courage and commitment to really being an asset rather than a liability. And that Wilmot Collins, being this mayor of Helena, Montana, has sort of been the model for them to aspire, if that's what's possible. Now, because the immigration has changed, him and Maddie believe that if given the same situation they had 28 years ago, the chance of them getting into this country now, despite the well-meaning, despite the Nachheims, they may probably not have been as would have been successful. So I just find it extremely inspiring. And I believe that a lot about what people hear and the fear that comes from for the most part, not based on any reality, but just a fundamental racism and fear of other, is what's really driving a lot of this. But when push comes to shove, and I've seen it in Christian Science Monitor in particular, they have tracked the immigrant community over the past few years, and they have seen them in Iowa and Nebraska and Michigan and Tennessee, and they do their darndest to integrate into the communities, joining the 4-H clubs and being school bus drivers, and they're really doing their best. So my personal heartfelt thought is that the immigrant and refugee community from 1642 on is a huge asset to this country. I think we've got plenty of room. I think we've got plenty of resources, but we have to really open our hearts to, first of all, the incredible crisis that they're running from. We have never had that in this country. We don't know what it's like to have people shooting you in the street, taking your sons, putting them into military camps, killing your father who happened to have a small business and he refused to take a bribe. We haven't had that yet in this country. So the motivation for them coming is really drastic. So I think I continually make prayers that our country will really open up its arms, as the Statue of Liberty has said, bring us your poor, your hopeless, your weak in spirit and heart, and we will take them in with love and wisdom and lots of compassion. But anyway, Wilmot Collins inspires me and hopefully will inspire some of you folks as well.